Now available in paperback and e-readers. Isis, Runway of Doom. The goddess next door struts her stuff on the catwalk to take on a runway of rogues in this action-packed all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Runway of Doom at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Invincible creator Robert Kirkman says that classic superheroes change too little. Now, Invincible creator Robert Kirkman has the opinion that classic superhero characters don't change enough. And according to him, he believes that superhero characters need to go out here and do things like grow older, get married, have families, and eventually, in some cases, pass down their mantles to the next generation and then get older and die. Yeah, that's not going to be good for sales. And while he believes that that life cycle is one that would be very compelling storytelling for most readers, it's not really a good story model for the business of publishing. Now, in the business of publishing, one of the core reasons that many publishers don't want their characters to go out here and change too much is because they basically want to make sure that these characters can become accessible to the next generation. And that's been the mindset of most publishers ever since superheroes came out in 1938. Basically, ever since that time, many publishers basically saw superhero characters as characters for children and saw them as characters that would basically show children the world around them. And as those children basically read those comic books, eventually what happened in most cases is that those children basically, once they hit the age of about 13 or 14, they, in the old days of the Greatest Generation and the Silent Generation, they would let those books go and basically move on. And as they moved on to things like YA books, and eventually then moved on to adult fiction. That was usually the pattern as related to the phases of reading that many kids basically had until we started to reach the later stage of the baby boomer generation. Now, with the baby boomer generation, basically we saw a complete shift as related to the viewpoint, as related to comic book superheroes, and usually most people, they started forming emotional attachments and personal attachments to these characters. And as they formed these attachments to these characters, they wanted to see these characters' lives start to change. And some publishers did go out here and look to create organic change in these characters. Like in the case of Spider-Man with Peter Parker, he no longer continued to go on to high school. Eventually, they decided to let him graduate from high school and even let him graduate from college. And over at DC Comics, this is where Robin the Boy Wonder eventually became Robin the Teen Wonder, and eventually then graduated to start becoming his own man, which was known as Nightwing. And this whole pattern of characters changing eventually started to accelerate in the era of Generation X, where I was a part of that generation, and I saw this whole pattern of looking to go out here and accelerate growth basically start to happen as related to things due to many kids basically growing up in latchkey homes. And as they grew up in latchkey homes, that's where we started to see many of the Gen X kids form emotional attachment with characters that they saw on television and read in comic books because their parents were not at home to basically be there for them because they were busy at work. And as their parents were at work and the mother was at work, the dad was at work, kids basically started to form relationships with characters like Spider-Man, Superman, Optimus Prime, He-Man, and many other characters that were a part of the pop culture at that time. And as they formed these emotional attachment with these characters, a lot of those people who were a part of Gen X and the later part of the baby boomer generation, they wanted these characters to start growing up with them. Yeah, that's not healthy. Not healthy at all. And as they wanted those characters to grow up with them, they wanted to see these characters go out here and do things that they were doing in life, like getting married and even having families. And that's where we started to see a clash with the overall publishing business model of comic book companies. And while some companies did try to cater to them, and I saw this with the wedding of Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson, and I also saw it with the way the new Teen Titans basically grew up to become the new Titans, and we saw characters like Speedy getting involved with Cheshire and having a daughter. We saw Donna Troy having a child, to mention Wally West taking over for Barry Allen. I mean, we saw that type of growth, but sadly, that type of growth basically took people out of the fantasy. And as it took people out of the fantasy, got stuff like Dan Jurgens' Titans with Argent, Risk, and Johto. And those books sold like garbage. On books like New Titans, basically the sales started to decline on a book like New Titans. Now, back in about 1981, again, when Marv Wolfman and George Perez created the New Teen Titans, the New Teen Titans was a huge hit for DC. Unfortunately, by the time we got to about 1991, basically with the New Titans book, yeah, we got a lot of organic progression as related to these characters' lives, as related to things like Dick Grayson becoming Nightwing, Donna Troy getting married and having her first child, and Speedy having his first child, and Wally West becoming the Flash. But when it came down to the Titans book basically wound up struggling as related to sales, and with the whole situation with Dick Grayson getting ready to marry Starfire, that was the jump the shark moment, and that was one of the moments that basically made many comic publishers averse to making characters change, because if you change the characters too much, you can wind up alienating the audience, and wind up alienating the audience by making radical changes to the characters that you cannot go out here and walk back and be able to maintain your readership. And this is the core reason why many publishers don't like changing the classic characters, because if you change the classic characters too much, you could wind up alienating the audience. And if you wind up alienating the audience, then the next generation cannot access those characters. And that's where the comic book industry currently is, after many Gen Xers and baby boomers form too much of an emotional attachment with Marvel and DC characters. They form too much of an emotional attachment, and instead of going out here and growing out of their comic book phase and then moving on to novels and YA literature and other types of literature, they basically have gone out here and held on to these characters to the point where millennials like my cousin couldn't come in, and even Gen Z couldn't come in, and that's all because the characters didn't stay the same the way many literary characters do. Now, when I look at characters like Curious George, Curious George has stayed the same for about 60 years, and kids basically understand, hey, yeah, when I was 5-6 years old, Curious George was a cool character, and eventually you reach a point where you say, okay, at about 8, 9, 10 years old, I've outgrown Curious George books, and it's time for me to move on to other characters. But in the world of comic books, people don't understand that whole fact the way many readers of fiction like Curious George and Amelia Bedelia and even Harry Potter understand. Many of those kids understand, yeah, that character was cool for me when I was young, but there's a time when I have to let go of that character. I may enjoy the story, but it's just time for me to move on, because I am changing as a person, and as I change as a person, I'm going to let this character go so that the next generation of readers can go out here and enjoy this character and enjoy this story. That's what people understand in the world of the literary world, we understand, okay, yeah, I enjoyed Curious George. I enjoyed Richard Scarry when I was a little kid, but there's a point where I have to say, this character, they don't have to change, but I am changing. And now that I'm changing, I can let this character go and continue to be themselves for the next generation of kids so that they can enjoy this character and they can enjoy their stories. But in the comic book world, sadly, we've got this group of boomers and Gen Xers who basically want these characters to continue changing, not understanding there's a point in life where we have to let these characters go, and we have to let these characters go so that the next group of kids can go out here and enjoy those characters. Unfortunately, because many boomers and Gen Xers want to hold on to Superman, want to hold on to Spider-Man, want to hold on to the Hulk, want to hold on to Iron Man and the X-Men. These characters can't be passed on. And what's happened is that ever since then, millennials like my cousin basically moved over to PlayStation, and many of the Gen Z kids, they've moved on like to WWE and moved on to Monster High. They've basically created their own pop culture because many of the boomers and Gen Xers would not let these characters go, and because they want the characters to change to reflect their lives, the kids basically went out here and found their own characters and found their own pop culture characters, and now are creating their own thing. And they're creating their own thing right now because many of these guys like Robert Kirkman, again, they want the characters to go out here and grow up and change. But when it comes down to the kids, they don't really care about these characters anymore. They don't care about them because, again, you want the character to change to grow up with you instead of saying, okay, there's a time when I need to let this character go. I need to go out here and move on from that character onto other characters and go out here and move on to things like novels and literature. That's what adult men and women do. I mean, when I turned 18 years old, yes, I still did enjoy my comics, but I started to enjoy reading a lot of adult fiction and adult non-fiction. I started to graduate towards looking at more complex material, and that's the big problem with many of the boomers and Gen Xers is that, as related to pop culture, they're stuck in a state of arrested development, and as they're stuck in the state of arrested development, that's really stalling overall pop culture. This is why we have so many Star Wars remakes. I mean, we've had 3 phases. I mean, we had it in the 70s, we had it in the 90s, and now we had it in the 2010s, and people still trying to do Star Wars. We still have people with the MCU. Basically, it's a dead horse at this point, and we're trying to bring back 40-year-old IPs like He-Man, and basically wondering, oh, why is this stuff flopping? Well, the whole thing is that the world has basically changed, and because the comic characters basically are changing to fit one generation, what's happening is the new generation, basically, they can't access those characters because they're not seeing their stories being told. And as they don't see their stories being told with these characters, they're moving on to other characters and don't care about these characters because people basically form too much of an attachment and want these characters to grow up with them. And as they want them to grow up with them, they want the characters to change, but the characters were never designed to change. No, when it comes down to superhero characters, they're basically designed to be for children, and they're basically, once we hit adolescence, we're supposed to start letting go of these characters. And usually by the time many of us are 18, 19 years old, we're supposed to have moved on to other literature. We're supposed to be graduating to other literature. But sadly, when it comes to some of the boomers and Gen X, they're thinking, oh, I gotta have Spider-Man go out here and start having children. I gotta see Batman getting old. And yeah, I do love Batman Beyond, but the whole thing is, I understand Batman has to go back to those kids so that those kids can enjoy Batman. I understand those kids have to enjoy Superman. This is about these characters showing the kids the world, and letting those characters go is something that a lot of people don't want to do, but it's something we have to do. And this is coming from a guy who's been a fan of superheroes and comic books since he was 4 years old. I understand at 52, yeah, I gotta let these characters go so that the next generation of kids can enjoy them and enjoy their stories. And that's what makes them a lore that gets passed on from generation to generation. It gets passed on because people who are adults, who are mature, understand, yeah, there's a time when I gotta let this go, and let it go because the character, it's not supposed to change. What's supposed to change is that I'm supposed to move on. And once I move on, the kids can now enjoy those characters with stories that reflect their time and reflect their lives. We're not supposed to see these characters grow old. We're supposed to let them go and be a part of childhood and let the kids enjoy these characters the way little kids still enjoy Curious George, Amelia Bedelia, Madeline, and many other characters like Matilda. They enjoy those characters, and as they enjoy those characters like Harry Potter, basically they understand, yeah, that's a part of my childhood. I enjoyed those books when I was a kid, but now I'm an older person, and they weren't supposed to change. They were just supposed to teach me something about the world as related to life. And now that I've learned those lessons, I'm ready to move on to other things. And this is the sad part about the world of comics today, is that many of the creators don't have the maturity to understand comic book characters aren't supposed to change. We're supposed to change. And as we change, we're supposed to leave these characters behind and move on to more adult literature that reflects our adult lives. Now, my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, which is out here, is available on Lulu.com in paperback. And my other comic, Esteem No Good Deed, is available on Kindle for just 99 cents. And I have a lot of fiction on my SJS Direct imprint that is all ages. And I do have some books that have a bit more adult themes. And again, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to see me make more videos talking about the comic book industry, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available on Lulu, John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at Lulu.com today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, an offer he can't refuse. The man who rules the world gets a job offer he can't refuse in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes, an offer he can't refuse at Amazon.com and other online booksellers. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, Esteem a New Woman. The devilish diva starts on the road to becoming a new creature in Christ in this all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem a New Woman at Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.